What's up, Ark family? My name is Matt Robinson, and I'm a pastor at Southeast Christian Church. I'm also a grateful recovery addict and alcoholic, and really excited to be here with you today during Phase 2. I'm here with two of my really good friends, Eddie and Jody. We're all three a part of the SE recovery team, and we're based in Louisville, Kentucky. Southeast Christian Church is. We say we're one church in many locations, but one of the biggest blessings about our job is that we get to be present with you in every one of the centers that you're at right now across the state of Kentucky. And if you were with us in Phase 1, we unpacked the idea that God is interested more than just your behaviors. In this Level 2, we're really just unpacking and trying to learn some basic understanding or just get a grasp on this whole story of God, what is in Scripture, and really hope you're enjoying, after the videos, doing the work with the facilitators and the people that are leading your groups. I just want to let you know, if you're one of those people that when you watch videos and you get a piece of paper in front of you and it's got blanks on it, that you watch the videos intently waiting to find the answer for the blank, just know that when you were doing this, that the answers we're not going to give them to you as we're discussing right now. We're going to be unpacking some kind of bigger pieces and elements that go along with the story. But in your facilitator time, as you're going through the discussion, you'll be filling in those blanks. And so, like I said, here in Level 2, we're unpacking this story, the whole story of God and how Jesus is in all that, and where does that story, this big picture story of who God is, how does my story fit into that story? And so, EJ, man, catch us up right now. Where are we at in this story part?
Well, this is a very unique way to study the Bible, but to encourage you, this is one of the things we've learned, that looking at the Bible as a story is a great tool in not only learning about God, but learning about the Bible, but then also seeing yourself in it. And man, that's just a life-changing concept to think, man, I can know God and I can know my role here on earth. And so the past 2 weeks, we've been looking at this idea as the story of God is unfolding, that in the beginning, there was paradise. And our hope is that one day, again, there will be paradise. But we live in a real world, and we know this, paradise has been lost. And so last week, we looked at paradise was lost because of rebellion. Rebellion because of our choices, things that we were called to do, but also because God has enemies. There's some fallen angels who decided to rebel against God. And as part of that rebellion, they've made us their primary target. Because if they can get us, maybe they can take down God, or they can change the course of history. So today, Matt, we're going to look at, well, what happens after the rebellion? Where is this hope that we found last week, that there is a He coming, the promised one, the hero? Where is he at in this story? So as the story unfolds, here's what we find. Rebellion continues, Matt. It just keeps continuing, and it takes on new forms. And we're going to look at a really interesting person today who I never knew was in the Bible. There's a guy in the Bible named Nimrod. Did you guys know that? And when I was young, I remember I got in trouble because I actually called another kid a Nimrod. And my mom threatened to wash my mouth out with soap because she thought it was a cuss word. Had I only known that it was a character in the Bible, I would have saved myself a spanking and a mouth full of soap. But tell us about Noah, Matt. Where are we going today?
Yeah, the character of Noah is one that's so fun to unpack and look at. And if you can look at Noah, and again, looking at God's story and seeing where your story kind of overlaps in that, we see this guy Noah that shows up and is given a task from God. And all the characters that we see, it's neat because Noah has a specific thing to play in this part of the story, but he also gives like a little bit of a picture or a foreshadowing or a glimpse of what's to come in the person of Jesus. But the rebellion that happened is still there, and the rebellion is still going on. And so God reaches out and grabs this guy named Noah. The one thing I want to point out about Noah is that Noah was not a perfect man. God chose a loyal man. God chose somebody who when he reached out and asked him, that Noah, even with all with his imperfections and even with his character defects, he was still going to be a person that would respond when God called him. And so there's a story in Genesis 6 about the flood that's coming, and God reached out to Noah to say, hey, this is what's going to come. The people have chosen rebellion and chosen to go against my design and how I want things to run in my family. But I want to provide a way out, and I've chosen you to help provide a way out. Really crazy story. Like, I think when God asks us to do something, and maybe I don't know if it's like this all the time, But like to think that when God asked Noah to build the ark, there was 120 years estimated that it took him to build that boat. Thinking about 120 years from when God told him this was going to go down, I need you to do this. And then it actually, the rains and the waters broke out and the flood starts coming. That's really makes me think about the times when I feel like God's asked me to do something or I have something I'm needing to be doing, and I get weary in that. And I think, man, 120 years that it took place for him to build the boat, that all the time during that 120 years, God's heart were for his people to know that he has a plan, that he had made paradise, that we were made in his image, and that we have a place in the family business, knowing even that the people wouldn't come on that. So many pieces of Noah's story connect to Jesus, right? That our ways led us down a path and put us in a place where we deserved punishment. But God provided a way in Jesus. There was a door on the ark that people could get on. Another piece of the story is like that the ark didn't have a sail. It didn't have a rudder. It didn't have a steering wheel. I'm not a sailor. I don't know what you call those things.
Sounds good to me.
The steering thing, it didn't have one of those.
Yeah.
Literally, the only thing that it was a boat that was made that was going to protect them. And faith led Noah to get him and his family on the boat. And then what was on the boat, it was just faith that it was going to go wherever God wanted it to go. And even after that, even after the flood is over, we still see people's desire and nature for rebellion to come about. In Genesis 11, there's a story of the Tower of Babel. And if you have any connection to church at all, you've probably heard the Noah story, maybe with the flannel graph, right? With the little characters they kept sticking up there. If you heard the story of the Tower of Babel, any connection to church, it probably sounded like a building project that had gone awry, and that now that's why I can't understand people that speak different languages. There's so much more that was going on in that story, but the reality was that people were getting together, still trying to control. The reality was that people were getting together, still trying to control God's interaction with them and what they were going to do while they were here on this earth. And so when God came into Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel and scatters people, it was really a merciful thing that God did. Now, as a person who's in long-term recovery, a recovering alcoholic and drug addict, controlling things, fix, manage, and control, or my inability to fix, manage, and control things led to the majority, if not all, of the hardships and the struggle in my life. And so we can relate with the nature of rebellion that is in us and how we come together still wanting to control and do things on our own.
I think one of the things I've seen at Matt is the Tower of Babel is like creating this, the idea is that I'm going to bring God down to my level, that God's not responding the way I want. So I'm going to build a place, this thing where I expect God to come down to where I want him, when I want him, to do the things I want him to do. And man, God, he could have wiped this all out again. But yet he had mercy and compassion that even though we tried to make a God in our own image, he found a way to save us again.
And I love that what you said about the fix, manage, and control, because if that's what's happening as they build this tower, just like in our stories, we try to fix, manage, and control, and nothing good ever comes from that. And that really the ultimate statement is if we could have fixed it, we would have done that by now, right? Mm-hmm. That clearly there's something bigger at play here. And when you look at, as Tamba in the last session talked about that anticipation piece of the story, that's essentially all of the Old Testament. And as you follow the story of the Old Testament, God chose the Israelites to be the people to take this message of a savior to everyone. But as we follow their story, they turn away from God and back to God. And they turn away from God and back to God. And it's this back and forth story all the way through the Old Testament as we track what happens over the years. Kind of on repeat, we can see throughout history that when wicked men gather, bad things happen. Yeah. And when believers scatter, that is what God intended. That's how God intended for it to work, so that the message could be taken to the ends of the earth. In AA, we hear a lot, you gotta give it away to keep it. Did I get it right?
You did.
You
You
got
got
to
it.
give it away to keep it. And so we don't necessarily get to choose where we scatter, where as we're walking on our faith journey and taking the next step and the next step, where God chooses to scatter us to is not up to us. It's our job not to be perfect, but to be obedient to what he puts on our heart. And in last session, we talked about those 35,000 choices a day, right? We have lots of opportunities to choose to step towards obedience or to step towards this gathering, do what I want to do, fix, manage, and control, right? And it really, just to tie it all in with the story of Noah, we're just asked to get on the boat. We know God's going to be the one to close the door. We just have to be willing to get on the boat and go where it takes us.
Yeah, and I love what you said there about all the back and forth of God sets it up, gives us something to do, and the people we there and we mess up, and then man, we can trust God because God is trustworthy, and His plan for us is bigger even than the ins and outs and the ups and downs. And the path, like we tend to, when I first came in to this life of recovery, I had this view of God like He was this eternal scorekeeper, and that it was a very strict and very rigid, do these things and do not do these things, and the more do nots that I checked, the more disqualified that I felt. And looking back, like you were saying about how the ins and outs and the backs and forths of that, but God's love for His people, we can trust God because He is trustworthy. Mm-hmm. And even we see that in the character of Noah, because Noah was a guy that God reached out to, called, picked, however you want to say it, to build the ark and to preserve God's plan after the rebellion. That even in his story after that, we see a major piece of Noah where Noah got drunk. And to a guy who's an alcoholic, it's like, whoa, it feels like Dumb and Dumber. It's like, so you're telling me there's a chance. You know what I mean? God still uses people even if that is their struggle. Yeah. You know what I mean? And some of the struggles from some of the characters I can't necessarily connect with, but Noah got off the boat after seeing God do all He did, and Noah got drunk.
Blacked out drunk. His sons had to cover him up, right?
Yeah, like it wasn't he had a few too many at the wedding party. Like it was like dude was gone, blacked out drunk. And Noah, in that setting, so it's like, okay, God used him, you can identify him as faithful before, but then he blew it, right? He got blacked out drunk. The beauty of this whole story of God is if you look forward in Hebrews chapter 11, you see how Noah was still described even after that in the hall of faith. EJ, you want to unpack that Hebrews 11 for us?
Yeah, and so God kind of lists these, like this idea of we get a picture of heaven, and there's these great heroes of the Old Testament, and they're around, and one of them He lists is Noah. That Noah's faith is kind of listed as somebody that we should look up to and that is cheering for us. And to think that a drunk's in heaven rooting for us, Matt, I mean, that should comfort us, right? And it kind of is a comparison. We talked about this other character named Nimrod, who was kind of the opposite of Noah, who tried to make God on his own terms and build a city and build cities and openly basically call God down to His terms. But yet we're given Noah as the example we are to follow, that, man, I just need to trust God, be obedient, and even if you blow it, man, just be loyal, right? Just be loyal. Yeah. And that's such an important piece.
Yeah, and it's not even that you're telling me there's a chance, right? Like
He's there.
He's there.
Yeah.
And that God, that's the thing about this so cool is God is the author of this story.
Yeah.
And I have a part to play in that, but my part can't trump the one who wrote the story.
That'll preach.